Major Hurricane Lee is forecasted to make its turn north, but could it hit North America on its way up? Find out that and more next. Alrighty, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Nate, and welcome back to another weather forecast discussion, this time for September 9th, 2023. Now, I appreciate everyone for giving me a day off yesterday. I know I'm supposed to be uploading every single day, and I will continue to do that from now all the way up until Lee is done and over with. And I want to talk about Lee, but I also want to talk about some local severe weather that's going to be occurring here today. First off, we have our convective outlook here from the Storm Prediction Center. This essentially ranks stuff from a 0 to a 5 in severity. This light green is a 0 out of 5, or not really a 0, but it's a thunderstorm risk, if you will. This dark green, if you see this here, this is a marginal risk, or a 1 out of 5, and these yellows are a 2 out of 5 on the severe weather scale. So if you're in any of these yellows, some isolated severe weather is possible within some of your areas from now all the way up until tomorrow morning. But I think you guys know the reason why this video is here. It is because Hurricane Lee is here, and Hurricane Lee is doing some really weird things. First off, the last time I talked to you guys was on Thursday, and Lee was a Category 5 hurricane. It was 160 mile per hour winds, continuously rapidly intensifying. And then if we take a look down here, this is once again the 5 p.m. advisory here for Hurricane Lee. Look at this maximum sustained wind of 115 miles per hour. What happened? This thing absolutely plummeted. It is now a bottom tier major hurricane of Category 3 status. What happened? It was a Category 5. What actually happened is, well, Lee is experiencing shear. It's experiencing some shear here from the southwest to the north and east, and it is blowing over this thing. And usually when shear starts to kind of blow over certain stuff, it kind of tips it over. Say this cup, for instance, all right? This cup is standing straight up just like this. But if you have wind shear that blows over the top part of the hurricane, it starts to tilt the cup, right? And eventually, if there's water in here, which I am not going to test this theory here out in front of you all, the water will start to fall out of the cup. And the same premise is here. It's not able to keep the water in. It's not able to keep all the energy in the eye. And because of that, it starts to kind of dissipate, deteriorate quite a lot. And so that's the reason why this system is currently as it is. I could even, say this thing could probably be even weaker than 115 mile per hour sustained winds. Could very well be a Category 2 hurricane. But nevertheless, right now, it is making its way off towards the west-northwest. This is just to the north and east of the Lesser Antilles. So this thing should continue to steer away from your guys' areas. However, rip currents and, of course, tropical storm force wind gusts are still definitely something to monitor with that. But if we once again take a look here at the actual cone of uncertainty, this thing will continue on its trajectory, and it seems to be slowing down once we get towards the beginning of the week. We're talking about Monday into Tuesday, and this thing doesn't really move a whole lot until we get towards Wednesday, when we start to finally see it shift off towards the north. And I want to remind you guys, as we continue to talk about Lee here, that this cone of uncertainty right here is where the center could potentially be, which means the center could be a lot further west, it could be a lot further east, it could be a lot further north than anticipated. Somewhere within this general time frame is where the center is going to be. But I also want you guys to understand that just because that's where the center is, doesn't mean that's where the actual impacts will only be. Notice here you see these yellows and then this kind of red that's in the middle, or this orange that's kind of in the middle. That's the wind field of the tropical storm force winds in yellow, and in the red is in the hurricane force winds. And you can see how far it expands further out. I'm anticipating this to actually be a lot larger as it continues to move up the east coastline. So you guys want to see what happens when shear starts to deteriorate a storm? Well, there is the eye. And the eye is no more, well, you'll see here at least in a second, and the convection starts to wrap around all the way around the center of low pressure. But when you have dry air that starts to expand in the center, it starts to weaken it. And when your storm starts to deteriorate and deteriorate more and more, what that actually means is the wind field starts to expand more and more. And so what was a tightly compacted storm is now going to become a larger storm. Now, that doesn't mean that this larger storm can't become tightly compacted. It'll be tightly compacted as a larger storm now. So we'll see how this thing continues to monitor. But this was from Thursday night into Friday night. You'll see Friday night into as soon as the video uploads, or at least when I'm recording now, which is about 6:16 p.m. Eastern. And you can see it has the larger bands all the way around once again, and then it's trying to form an inner core, but it can't just wrap around into an eye anymore. So what's likely going to happen is it's going to undergo something called an eye wall replacement cycle, which is basically when these outer bands actually start to kill off the center eye wall, or the leftovers of that, and it'll start to constrict and form the new eye wall. And so that's going to be something really interesting to watch, especially over the next 48 hours, because this thing's not really going to be moving all too fast. It'll be over still very warm and favorable waters, okay shear, but still, if this thing starts to intensify once again, then that could potentially tell us as to what our future impacts could possibly be like. Now, to put into perspective, here's a microwave imagery here of the our storm in general, and you can kind of see a little bit right here. The outer eye wall that could potentially be trying to form right there. There's the inner core right here. You see this little crescent right in the center, and that's the center. All right, that's the center of Lee as it continues to move about. It's got a lot of bands, it's got a lot of thunderstorms, so this thing definitely still has a lot of activity within it. It just needs to start to organize it as it moves along. So before I get into the factors of how Lee is going to be influenced to wherever it's going to go, I want to give you guys all the possible solutions that are coming from the ensemble model. So we're going to take a look at the Euro first. We're going to see this continues to move about. We're talking about Tuesday now into Wednesday. This thing still seems to be within this general area just to the east of the Bahamas, but Wednesday into Thursday, the move off towards the north begins. You can see that some forecast it to be a little bit further towards the north in some of these red numbers, which is each its own little opinion, if you will. Some are still a lot further down to the south, but the interesting thing here is from Friday into Saturday, you can see at the top part of your screen right here, I'm going to color over it. You can see that's the general day that it will move on through. And as this continues to move about, we see from Saturday all the way over into the end of Sunday, a lot of these members think this is going to start to move off into the general vicinity of the Northeast, Nova Scotia, or Newfoundland. And this is what we're going to want to watch out for. Next weekend is when we're going to probably have some form of landfall from this system, because it will start to get very close towards the eastern portions of North America. So something to watch. But the other thing to watch here is notice how close it gets towards the Northeast. This means that this system could very well try to impact with tropical storm force winds or even hurricane force winds if it becomes a hurricane and sustains as a hurricane up to that point. And of course, all sorts of storm surge and flooding is still definitely possible. So I recommend that for the people that are in the Northeast, for the people that are in Nova Scotia and in Newfoundland, honestly, I would start taking preparations and start getting any sort of additional supplies that you may need in the off chance that this thing does move off into your area. We'll take a look here from the GEFS. This is the American model, if you will. And we're talking about Thursday here when this thing starts to kind of move its way off towards the north. This thing will then start to move up and along the coastline, not completely parallel with it, but somewhere in between Bermuda as well as the East Coast. And look at this. Once again, a wide area of possibilities where this thing could actually make landfall, but it is likely that it's going to be somewhere as far west as Long Island to as far east as Newfoundland as this thing continues to move off towards the north. So now let's get into the factors of why this thing is going the direction that it is going. And we're going to start here with the 850 millibar geopotential height, as well as the cyclonic vorticity in the shaded contours. And you're going to see that we have a high pressure system that's stationed off of Bermuda. It's creating a lot of clockwise flow, and because of that, a lot of the flow that is currently being put onto Lee is moving from the east to the west. So that's the reason why this thing is nudging itself across over north of the Antilles. But you can see as this continues to move about, our system's going to get a lot closer to that southwestern corner, which is then going to allow Lee to make that turn off to the north. And while that is happening, we also have a trough that we've been talking about since probably the beginning of last week. And that trough is actually going to help steer this thing and add stronger shear to push this off towards the north. So that's trough number 1 that was moving off from Wednesday into Thursday. And trough number 2 is actually going to be coming on through a few days later. So we go from Thursday into Friday, and we start to see this thing move off further and further north. And you can see the second trough is starting to move on through here, starting on Sunday. Big trough that's starting to move about. But look at how close this thing gets to New England as this thing continues to move further and further north. A potential landfall here, even into portions of Long Island, in towards Rhode Island. So definitely something to watch out for, specifically from Saturday into Sunday of next weekend. And to kind of further emphasize this point, we can show you that there's our jet stream. There's our trough that's going to be digging on through here from Tuesday into Thursday. So that's trough number 1 that starts to move. This thing moves off further north. And then here is trough number 2 that's going to be digging on through. And once again, aiding a lot of shear to kind of guide it further and further north. So what could be a realistic scenario? Well, just exactly what I just showed you. The Euro shows that this thing could potentially try to make landfall here somewhere in New England. Now, as I said, this is probably as far west as it can go, and it could very well be a lot further east. This could make landfall somewhere over here in Nova Scotia. But I think the big thing here that we want to take away from this is that this thing is a very large storm. You can see the distance here is about 195 nautical miles. That is well above 200s to toot miles. So this is a very large storm away from the center of low pressure, which means there's going to be a lot of winds, a lot of flooding, especially along areas that are going to be in the Sound, areas that are along Cape Cod, and even further areas that are up north. Or if it makes landfall over here near Nova Scotia, then once again, a lot of storm surge is possible across some of those areas, which is the reason why I say you guys might want to start taking preparations now, just on the off chance that it does happen. Speaking of preparations that could take place, week 2 of NFL football is going to be during that weekend. Of course, week 1 is tomorrow, so I hope all of you enjoy that, as well as college football, if you do enjoy that, of course. But the only game that's going to be occurring in the Northeast, and I've looked across, the Giants, the Jets, and they aren't home, but the New England Patriots are. The New England Patriots are going to be in Foxborough, and it's a Sunday night football game, which is kind of interesting because if this thing makes landfall on that Sunday, I guarantee you they're going to cancel this game. They're going to postpone it to some time else. So just something to note for people that could be going to that game, could very well be canceled. So just something to just keep in mind with. But other than that, that's where we're at right now. I mean, Lee is definitely trying to intensify. We can take a look one final time at the satellite imagery, and you can see there's a lot of thunderstorms that are starting to appear near the center. It's going to try and form an eye once again. It's going to try and actually intensify back into a Category 4 once again. But as of right now, it's currently over waters, which means it's not really impacting much besides the fish. So I hope you guys enjoyed this update. Make sure that you guys stay prepared regardless of what this thing does. Rather have you guys safe than sorry, but otherwise, thank you guys so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, turn on notifications, share this with friends and family and on social media, and also follow me on social media. Links will be in the description down below. I will catch you guys next time. Stay safe, everyone, and peace out.